think we'll make a start and then I can let people in as they come along. So welcome everyone to our Meet the Funder event. My name is Nicola Hillier. I'm one of the grants officers here with Wiltshire Community Foundation. We also have our wider grants team with us today. We have Jane Butler, who is our Programme Director, and also Karen Hobbs, our second grants officer, who I'll be handing over later on after Hannah's presentation this morning. I'm sure that you're all very familiar with Zoom and virtual meetings by now, but just a few instructions before we start today. If you haven't already done so, I would ask that you mute your microphones throughout the presentations this morning. Along the bottom of your screen, you should get a toolbar where you'll be able to see an option to mute your microphone there. There is also a chat facility, so I welcome you to use that throughout the morning. Introduce yourself, your organisation and your role, and please feel free to use the chat throughout the morning to ask any questions that might come up, and we'll be collating those ready to address at the end of each presentation. And we ask that you all have your name shown correctly in your video. If you don't know how to change it, if you hover on your picture, your video, you'll see 3 dots and you'll be able to click on that and then change your name from there. We will share copies of the slides after the event, so we'll make those available to you. And we are recording the session today, just to aid with our note taking and then to make that available for those that wish to join but couldn't be with us this morning. So for those of you who are familiar with Wiltshire Community Foundation, in normal times we would hold an annual funding conference, a large scale annual funder conference. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that over the last year. To compensate for that, we are now facilitating a series of virtual Meet the Funder events over the next 12 months. And at the end of the session, I'll be sharing with you the remaining Meet the Funder events that we are available. I'd now like to hand over to Hannah Litherland from the National Lottery Community Fund, who is Wiltshire and Swindon funding officer with them, who'll be presenting on her programmes. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Nicola. Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah. As Nicola said, I'm the local funding officer for Wiltshire and Swindon. I've got a little bit of feedback. Is everybody mics muted? Sorry, just to start with that. Is that, yeah. Has everyone got their mics muted? Just I can hear myself, which is really disconcerting when but that's great. I think someone's, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So as Nicola said, I'm from the National Lottery Community Fund. I'm just going to be doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour, really, of our funding programmes and our main priorities at the moment. And as Nicola said, kind of, if you put your questions in the chat, we'll get to them at the end. I just can't see them as I'm going through the presentation. So yeah, don't worry too much. We'll have time for questions at the end. What I might just do is I'm going to stop my video just while I'm doing this so I can see everything properly on my screen. And then I'll turn my video back on again at the end and we can kind of go through any questions there. So let me just do that and move a few things around. Can everyone see the first slide? That's just the National Lottery Community Fund Meet the Funder. Yeah, perfect. Great. So let me just click on here. Can everyone see the next slide, the agenda? Perfect. Everything's working. Wow, great. So this is just a quick agenda for today. I'm going to cover our kind of priorities, what we have on offer in terms of our funding at the moment. I actually manage our Reaching Communities grants locally. So my main detail is going to kind of cover that Reaching Communities funding option, but I think it's actually beneficial to most grants that you're applying to for the fund. The same kind of priorities apply throughout. So although I'll kind of cover that as the main thing, I think, you know, you should be able to get a lot out of it. So as some of you might know, we've returned to our main funding offers. We did have a period of really short-term emergency funding, and that was the government grants that we would distribute distributing. So we've gone back to our main funding programs, which is Reaching Communities and Awards for All. And there's been a couple of slight changes, which some of you might have noticed and some of you might not have applied for a while. So I'll go over those kind of quick changes as well as we go through these slides. So let's go on to the next one. So this is just a quick overview about the Community Fund. So we're a non-departmental public body, so we're delivering public funds. We do work at arm's length from the government, but ultimately we're accountable to the Parliament. So we are public in terms of the activities that we do. As most of you will know, our income actually comes from lottery players. So of every £2 spent on a lottery ticket, it's about 56p actually that goes back to good causes. And we've switched back. So in terms of the lottery funders, there's 4 of us. So there's Heritage, Sports, Arts and us. We're actually the biggest distributor of all those funders. I've just put a little bit here around what we actually distribute to the Southwest, because we get that question quite a lot. So it's actually 36 million that we distribute across the Southwest, which is roughly about 450 organisations. Of that locally, that obviously applies to us here in Wiltshire and Swindon, it's about 1.7 million a year that we fund. And I had a quick look, we're currently actually supporting about 28 organisations at the moment. That's across all of our funding programmes. There we go. So bear with me through. And they've just put these our goals, basically the 3 things that we kind of cover in terms of our purpose as a funder. So it's our ethos, which is about people understand what's needed in their communities better than anyone. So it's our aim as a funder to listen, collaborate and fund things in terms of community. So these are our 3 goals, which I just wanted to put out here. And what we'll move on to is our vision, which I think is the main kind of thing that I wanted us to fund today in terms of what we look for in our funding. So our vision is people in the lead. These are the other 2 things that we focus on as a funder, which is strengths-based work and connectivity. Nicola, have you got the video that's going to be hopefully play for everybody? You're just on mute.
It will stop sharing your screen at this point. Are you ready to for the video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this video, I wanted to share this because it explains what we actually mean by people in the lead. And as that's our main priority as a funder, I just wanted to share this video with everybody. Hopefully it comes up soon.
It's just loading.
Perfect. Thanks, Nicola. Yeah.
Can you hear the thing?
No.
No.
A lot of shaking heads.
The video is buffering now. I think my internet connection isn't very stable. I do apologise.
Okay, no worries. We can move on. We can maybe play it at the. Should we just move on and play it at the end? Is that more helpful?
It might be my internet connection, but we can make it available. We can send it out afterwards.
Okay, no worries. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. Can everyone see Am I sharing my screen again? Okay, perfect. There we go. Let's move back. Okay, sorry about that. So that was supposed to be a video for what we mean by people in the lead, but we'll kind of share that at the end. We've also got some things here that's obviously the other things that we look for, which is strengths-based and connectivity. So what do we mean by strengths-based? We want to encourage people and communities to think about what the strengths are in their community, and to make those changes themselves. So we would like you to show that you will be using our grant to increase what is already strong, rather than put right as wrong. So that's what we need to know, what matters to your community. How can we help support the strengths and not what you think needs putting right, so to speak. Connectivity, it's really simple. It's about being connected in terms of, you know, what your community want to see, you're aware of the services that exist, what opportunities exist, and you have a plan on how you want to build on those opportunities. So it's just showing this throughout your application. We'll get to what the kind of questions are a bit later on in this presentation, but you'll notice that essentially the questions that we ask are asking you to draw out these three key things. So just move on to the next slide. Okay. So this is our approach to funding. So we know that communities come in all shapes and sizes. So as a fund, we're for everybody. So we need to ensure that we are reaching out to those that maybe don't think that we're the right funder for them. So as part of that, we've changed a lot of how we approach funding, really. And some of you may have applied recently, but some of you may not have applied for a few years. And hopefully, if you do apply and you haven't applied for a few years, you'll notice these changes. So we're a flexible funder. And that's a key ambition as ours, in terms of not just what we fund, but also how we fund. So our processes have been changed and refreshed. They've been redesigned to be more flexible. So we're allowing applicants to take their time in terms of submitting their applications and going through those processes. We've also adapted quite a lot of what we do based on the COVID-19 recovery as well, and the pandemic itself. So we've listened to kind of what organisations wanted us to do, and we've changed that. So in terms, and so what that means is, in the assessments and the management of whole, if you're applying for £50,000 over a year, as opposed to say £500,000 over 5 years, the kind of level of detail and what we want to know from you is going to be different. So rather than changing each process to kind of say that person applying for £500,000 or that person applying for 50k, we've changed it so that my role would help you in that kind of support. So the 3 questions at the beginning of what we ask, which I'll get to a bit later, they don't change. It's just the level of detail that we then expect from you through the process changes. So that's kind of what we mean about proportionality. It's also changed that it's conversational. So locally, for example, if you're applying and we feel like the idea is something that can move forward with our funding, the approach we'll take with that, rather than asking you to go in lots of detail if we don't need it, our conversational approach is that we will ask you the questions that we think are missing. We'll ask you for that detail that we think will help you throughout the process. So again, it's kind of aimed at you as a applicant or an organisation, and we want to kind of get the best out of that idea, really. So that's kind of how we're approaching it. Our approach still remains conversational, even during lockdown, we'll have those conversations with you, over Teams, over Zoom, over the phone. We can't visit at the moment, but it's so will kind of remain in that conversational approach. So these are just 3 things I wanted to highlight. These are the 3 funding priorities in England at the moment. So it's the stronger relationships, sustainable places and spaces, and early action. So these are the 3 things that we, rather than you kind of telling us whether you're doing these things, this is something for us to kind of look out for in applications. So I wanted to just share those 3 priorities. These are actually priorities that have came out of discussions that we've had in England. So it's with grant holders, stakeholders, organisations across the voluntary sector. Have told us these are the 3 things that matter. And so I guess from our questions about how the third sector kind of wants us to add value as a funder, these are the 3 values that came out as important for communities. So that's why these priorities are here. For us, they kind of develop and change, and that's all from conversations with you as a sector, really. So just wanted to make those clear. And also just to highlight that we've also kind of changed our priorities in response to the pandemic. So alongside those 3 main priorities, we're also going to continue to prioritise proposals that respond to the crisis, and that's because it's not over and we're still in that. So I just wanted to kind of make it clear that we will still support groups, continue delivery activity that's responding to like the crisis and or the recovery, and that changing and adapting that organisations kind of need to do to be resilient, to respond to what we think those future challenges are. So that, yeah, it's not forgotten. We are kind of looking at that, and we want you to tell us what that need is and kind of how you want us to respond, really. So that's also something that you can kind of apply to us as a funder for. In terms of our funding offer currently, so if you kind of go onto our website at the moment and you click through onto funding, you'll see these 2 main funding options, which is Awards for All, which hopefully most of you will have heard about, and also Reaching Communities. It's what we call Reaching Communities and Partnerships. So I'll kind of go into a little bit more about that later on. But essentially, we've reopened, I think it was just at the end of 2020. So our main responsive funding programmes are these 2. These are the same programmes that operated before the COVID. So there's a few adaptations and changes to them, but essentially they're the same as they were before COVID. All of our open funding programmes change in terms of the national programmes. So you should always just kind of check back on our website. And what I try to do as well is just share that locally. So for example, literally just this week, we've opened a new national programme, which is called the Climate Action Fund, for example. So those things open and they're not by my team. You should just kind of keep an eye out for our funding programmes if you think it's something that you can apply to. In terms of how we get that information out, I give that information to Wiltshire Community Foundation, Voluntary Action Swindon, any other voluntary organisations that have like newsletters and stuff. I tend to put that information there. So hopefully if you're joined up on those, you should find out about those national programmes as well. But as I said today, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on Awards for All and Reaching Communities. So just a quick overview of Awards for All. And this is mainly because I don't actually manage these grants, but what is on offer. So this is our most popular programme in England. It's relatively responsive, so it's 1 year's worth of funding. You can apply from £300 to £10,000. It's done online actually, so I think I haven't applied myself, but I think it's 1 question and then the decision, you'll get the full decision within 12 weeks. So it's pretty quick and it's managed by our team in Newcastle. The main aim of it is to support smaller grassroots organisations, but this sometimes is a great way to kind of apply for the funding in terms of if you've not applied before or you want funding quickly, this is probably going to be your main program to apply to. In terms of, like I said, I'm going to focus on reaching communities and partners. That's the grant program that I manage. So let's move to reaching communities. This is managed by our Southwest team, and so I'll focus more on this today. So it's aimed at organisations and communities that have an aspiration to work on proposals. So you can expect us to be, like I said with all those things earlier, much more flexible and responsive with this funding. So you can apply for longer term funding. We do still fund short term funding, so we can fund up to a year. Whether your request is for a particular activity or it's more about fundamental change within the sector or your particular sector itself, whether the funding is to support a single organisation or to bring different organisations together. So that's that partnership strand. As you can see, there's not much that we don't fund here. There's core, fixed costs, capital costs, organisational development, and anything project related. So that question that always comes up about who does fund costs, we do fund core costs. And as I said, it can be shorter term or longer term. Existing projects, expansion of projects, developing new ways of working. We can cover costs for like sharing learning and impact. We even support organisations to just adjust to the new normal or focus on something really specific that they know they need. So financial, strategic or operational planning. We've funded organisations to restructure. So there really isn't much here that you can't apply to us for. You just need to kind of go back into those 3 priorities, which I covered earlier, which we'll go into a bit more detail in terms of the video that we can hope send round. But all of these things are possible with our funding. So hopefully there's nothing in there that essentially apply to us for. So I just wanted to quickly cover the application process. So what actually happens when you apply to us. Again, this is that proportionate approach. So you can work at your own pace with this really. So once you've submitted an application to us, it usually takes about 12 weeks to receive an email from us or a phone call from me, usually if you're in my area. Which is either an unsuccessful email. If you get that unsuccessful email, we will try and give you some feedback as to why. Or the alternative to that is that we request a little bit more information from you. So that's after the 12-week period. If we're requesting more information from you, what we'll also try and do is either meet with you or, like I said, kind of have at the moment, have that Zoom or Teams meeting with you, just to find out more about the project really. And at that point, what we'll also give you is a few additional questions. So again, we make it about your organisation or about your project. And the idea of that is that you give us then this full proposal and you give us that information at your own pace. So sometimes that takes weeks, in which case you'll get your answer back quicker. If that takes months, that's obviously going to hold up the process a little bit our end, and in which case you'll get that information back. As soon as you give it back to us, we'll kind of give you a decision. We are a funder that meets probably on a weekly and monthly basis in terms of these decision meetings. So, you know, we try and work as quickly as we can in terms of getting information and answers back to people. I wanted to just quickly cover who can actually apply. Again, it's really varied. So you don't just have to be a registered charity to apply to us. So that's obviously there on the list, but you could also be a constituted group or a club, a voluntary community organisation or a not-for-profit company or CIC. So they're the organisations that can apply. If you're unsure or you're not sure where you fit, it's always best to kind of just get in touch with us and double check. But hopefully in saying what we kind of can't accept applications from, it should be quite clear. And that's just companies, organisations based outside the UK, or actually, interestingly, like if you have your main contacts or anyone based outside the UK who's applying to us, that would actually be something we can't accept as well. Organisations that don't have at least 2 trustees, and if those trustees are married or in any sort of kind of relationship, partnership, or living at the same address, that's also something we kind of can't accept. So it is just worth making sure that you're in line with these things before you apply to us. Also, organisations applying on behalf of others, we can't fund that either, but hopefully your groups and organisations fit into who can apply. So this is just a quick overview of reaching communities and partnerships in terms of what we ask for. So as you can see, it's relatively easy in terms of what we ask for, but what I wanted to just draw attention to is number 4, 5 and 6. So when I covered earlier that those priorities for the fund, which is people in the lead, strengths-based and connectivity, you'll see you've got 4, 5 and 6 to kind of answer those questions with what we look for. So we said about people in the lead, and we're asking you how you'll actually involve the community. So you just need to tell us exactly how you are going to do that. That's that question there of 5 around connectivity, how your work fits with local activities. So tell us who else you're working with, how you work with other groups, how you know that your activity isn't duplicating what else is going on in the area. So it's just really pinpointing those things into question 5 and 6, that, you know, the kind of difference that it will make. Again, it's about people in the lead, it's about the community. So tell us those 3 things in those questions. The others are obviously easy for you to answer: what your organisation does, how much money you actually need from us. So actually, as the first step for reaching communities and partnership, I think we've really streamlined this process. That's 8 questions, but as I said, there's 3 really to focus on the actual activity that you want from us. The information that's kind of changed that I've seen in the last couple of months, again, it's relatively simple information that we want to know, which is something that we didn't ask before, which is interesting, but it's the number of staff and volunteers that you've got, and it's lived experience in terms of the people who are on your senior management team or trustees or whatever your setup is, to just tell us that those kind of lived experience people that you have involved in your community, in your organisation, sorry, from the community. And we also now ask for a main and senior contact. So we want those kind of 2 contact details up front. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to highlight what those questions were, because I think it's important that people kind of understand what that process is before you apply. Also, you know, always get in touch with me if you're worried about any of this part of the process, or you want a bit of a heads up for what we will ask. I can actually send you that information in advance. I know people kind of sometimes want to work on it offline before they apply, and yeah, we've got opportunities to be able to do that. So this, again, still within reaching communities and partnerships. This is actually the next part of the process. So if your application is eligible, and obviously you've got that email from us to say that you're going to move on to the next stage and we want a little bit more detail from you, these are the things that we actually ask for. So again, it's that proportionate approach. So you can develop your application at your own pace. We just want you to tell us in more detail about that proposal. You can actually submit that to us in your own format. So we don't have a set template anymore. All of that information has gone. So it's literally, you tell us what you need and you tell us in a way that is most helpful for your organisation. We'll let you know if we need anything else. So if we think you've missed some really key things that we think you need to cover, we'll actually just get back in touch with you and let you know what that is and give you the opportunity to develop it. If the information, I guess this is where kind of complexity and proportionality kind of comes in a bit more. If you're asking us for £1 million, we're going to want a lot more detail than if you're asking for £20,000. So again, the kind of level of detail that we will ask you to go into will be dependent on what you're asking for and for how long you're asking for. What I've included here as well is just what we kind of need in terms of, we would need a budget. We have a template for that. We need to know what your current financial position is. We have a template for that. So you literally fill out those templates for us and submit it with a recent bank statement. So that's the next part of the process. Again, we'll aim to get back to you within another 12 weeks. It's normally a bit quicker than that, dare I say it. It normally is. So 12 weeks is the maximum. This is something I just wanted to include. So this has kind of come about a little bit more in terms of what we ask for in terms of safeguarding information. And that's just because actually what's happened is obviously everyone's had to change the way they're working at the moment. So particularly when you think moving projects online, offering kind of opportunities online that maybe you didn't do before. And so those kind of safeguarding policies become, well, it's interesting to us at the moment because we just want to see that you've updated them, really. But why I've included this slide is actually we've worked with NCVO to host a number of resources for us. So we've given them the funding to give those resources out for free to the sector. So if it's something that you're not sure your organisation either has or you think it would need updating, I would suggest looking at that before you apply to us. And obviously, as I say, there are resources out there for you to be able to go and do that. So do take a look on that website. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that that's something we're looking at quite closely. So this is just a quick overview of what actually happens if you're successful with us. So we do a grant setup. So in our region, you'll have a conversation with me and I'll talk you through all the process and I'll talk you through the expectations of what we have as a funder. Got really clear information about it as well, on our website. And so hopefully, again, it's quite a kind of conversational approach, and where possible, we'll try and visit and kind of have that chat with you face to face. And I wanted to just quickly cover grant reporting, actually. So we get quite a lot of questions about it and people kind of worrying about the reporting process. It's changed quite drastically since probably 18 months ago. It is about that kind of grant reporting side, the fact that it can feel that each funder wants something different from you as organisations. So what we've done is streamline that process, and we want it to just be something that feels quite easy for you to do. So of course you want to hear about the project, but sometimes that can be in a meeting with us or phone call. Some groups send us their annual reports, especially if they're really detailed, that's actually enough information for us. If it's really project specific, what we'll normally do is ask you to submit us a grant report that you're maybe sending to another funder. So say you've got another funder funding the project that we're funding, you could just send us what you're sending them. But essentially the key things we want to know about is the community involvement, the difference that the funding's made. And we're really, really interested in your learning. So that's kind of what we base our monitoring on now. And we try to kind of make that into a larger learning process for the sector. So we have a knowledge and learning bank on our website, which is always worth having a look at, which is supposed to kind of give everybody that key learning for say in a particular sector or a particular project, we can share that information so that it's helpful for everybody. And that's the end. I just wanted to put my contact details here. We've also got the Southwest team. If people are interested in applying for Awards for All, I wouldn't suggest coming to me just because I don't know enough about it. But what I've done there is just put our advice line. They know everything about our funding. So always do just kind of use them as a way of, if you're new to the fund and you're not quite sure what you want to apply for or what the best fund would be for your project or for your organisation, do just give the advice line a call and they'll chat through what they think and help you kind of guide you through the processes really. If you're really sure you want to apply for reaching communities and partnerships, obviously that's where I come in and our Southwest team comes in a bit more. And if you want to chat to me about an individual project or something specific that you're at the point where you're ready to apply, then do just kind of drop me an email. And I'm really, really happy to talk to people about that process. So I've put, Nicola, did you want to do questions now, or did you want to save those for the end?
Yeah, I think there's some specific questions for you and the lottery funding, Hannah. So if we could maybe answer those.
Let me, should I just stop sharing my screen? Bear with me, everybody, 2 seconds.
Great, thanks, Hannah.
Okay.
There's about 4 questions here. One specifically looking at the loneliness grants that you had, and whether you'll be launching a round 2. Is it still going ahead, and what the timings were for it?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. That's part of our national programme. We tend to find out as local officers about a week before, and I'll always do my best to kind of launch that to all of the local infrastructure organisations, at least on the day that it's launched, so people know about that. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. Sorry.
Is it something maybe we could find out and send post-event, Anna?
Yeah, what happens with those national funding programmes is a different team kind of decide on what we're gonna do. And then, like I said, they launch it. So they'd be really unlikely to tell me, but okay. I can definitely ask that specific question and see whether anyone's got any information in the fund. But as I say, when those funding, so like the Climate Action Fund, for example, that launched this week, as soon as that's available information, I literally try and send it out everywhere so that people can kind of make the most of those national funding programs, because I know they're also not usually open for I guess a long amount of time. It's normally about 6 to 8 weeks that they stay open for. So what I try and do is just get those launched to, you know, your Wiltshire Community Foundation newsletters, of somewhere we put it, Voluntary Action Swindon, Wessex Community Action. We send it to the council's newsletters. So that's kind of, we know locally that's the best way to get the information out. But apart from that, that's the way that we work in terms of national programmes.
Okay, great, thank you. And there's a specific question around eligibility. Can community benefits societies apply to the lottery funding? Yeah,
they can. It's the reason I put those kind of caveats for what we don't fund. They can, as long as they you know, have more than 2 trustees that aren't related to each other or live in the same house. So yeah, they can. It's just ensuring that they tick those other boxes before they apply. In terms of that, as long as so there used to kind of be a weird unwritten rule that it doesn't apply anymore, which used to be you kind of have to be on your way to kind of converting into some sort of, you know, charity or whatever you wanted to become, like a CIC. That's not actually the case. We just want organisations to apply to us in the format that they are currently in, and if that's the right structure for them, we obviously advise them to stay in that structure. So yeah, they are eligible.
Great, thank you. Somebody asked, when does your year start and end, Hannah? Does it go with the normal financial year?
Oh, financial year. Yeah, we are just about to end, so it's April. Yeah, April.
Brilliant. Yeah. And do you have a grant reporting template at all that you can share?
Yeah, we do. Well, it's not exactly a template. So as I said, we're pretty flexible with grant reporting now. But what we do, if there is a group that needs something specific and you do just want questions from us for what we roughly want to know about, yeah, there is a template. I can forward that on to you, Nicola, if you want to share it with everybody.
Thank you.
It's also on our website. But it's potentially more difficult to find. That I appreciate that our website isn't that easy to navigate. So yeah, I'll send the template directly to you.
Lovely, thanks, Hannah. There's a specific question from a church about whether you would fund a kitchen or servery. Do you fund church buildings?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
With capital projects, it's I guess our main thing that we find with capital projects is it's really easy to focus on those capital elements and say, of course we need, say, a new kitchen or a new hall space because it looks bad or it's old. And obviously the main thing to really focus down in on capital for us is those 3 priorities still. So still tell us why it's important to the community. Still tell us why, you know, if you're wanting a new kitchen, what's that going to enable you to do? I think it's quite easy to fall into the trap with capital to just tell us those capital elements and say that you've got a really good plan for the capital part, but just don't forget about those priorities in terms of what we actually care about, which is the community part of it. And I think in terms of capital stuff, there's always going to be something that it's going to enable you to do more of, or do something better. So just remember to kind of focus in on that. But yeah, absolutely, capital is something that we fund.
Right. Thank you. And if a group's got a potential idea for a grant that they'd like to discuss, is it okay to come directly to you, or should they address that to the national team?
Yeah, it just depends. So as I said, because we are such a big beast as the lottery, I think we employ like over 600 people. So we are quite segmented in what we kind of manage. And I know that can be quite frustrating. So yeah, there would be kind of not much point coming to me if you want to apply for Awards for All, just because it's a different team and what they're looking for and how they manage things is different to how we manage, let's say, Reaching Communities grants. So yeah, Awards for All, I would go to the national team, which is that slide at the end that I put on there. There's also tons of information on the website. There really is a lot on there. But if you want to apply for Reaching Communities or a partnership grants, then absolutely, yeah, you feel free to get in touch with me and just give me a call or send me an email and we can set up a time to talk about it.
Great, thank you. There are a couple of other questions, but I'm conscious of time, so we'll move on, and then we can either address them at the end or we can get the answers to those questions afterwards and send them out to everyone.
All right, yeah, whatever suits you.
Thank you. So now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Karen Hobbs, who is the Grants Officer with Wiltshire Community Foundation, who will be explaining about our grant programmes on our eligibility. Thanks.
Hello, I'm just going to get some slides up for everybody. Oh. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that now. Okay. So yes, I think probably a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be fairly similar to Hannah, but in terms of pointers around, you know, who can apply and the sorts of priorities. But it'd just be interesting for those that aren't familiar with our grants, exactly how we're doing things at the moment. Okay, so at Wiltshire Community Foundation, we sort of focus on sort of several areas of work. So obviously people will be familiar with our grants to groups. We do have a few programs that provide grants to individuals, particularly around education, and our Surviving Winter programme. We do provide, as we are doing today, information and advice and networking for groups in Wiltshire and Swindon. And we do a lot of supporting donors to give to their local communities as well. So that's one of the big focuses we have. So that might be corporate donors, it might be other trusts, it might be individuals that wish to give to their community. And we also do work around exploring need in our communities, which helps us to understand where our grants will make the most difference, but we can also share that information with local groups so they can be using that to support grant applications and their own development as organisations. So in terms of the grants that grant programs that we're running at the moment, during the current pandemic, we obviously, like all funders, have sort of made changes to how we're working. So at the moment, we've sort of moved a number of our grant programs into our coronavirus response and recovery grants, and we're keeping those going for the time being. And we hope that that groups are finding this to be a very flexible response, and that really, like Hannah said, we are taking a conversational approach to just talking to groups, understanding what they need and looking at the sort of best fit in terms of grants and how we can support groups with their sort of recovery or meeting needs that are arising from the pandemic. So at the moment, we are offering grants up to 12 months, and we're looking at those being for services that have been set up or adapted to meet needs because of coronavirus, keeping an organisation going during and after the crisis. And we will also still be taking applications for our usual sort of approach of new projects or developments to existing services. It doesn't necessarily need to be coronavirus related. For people who were familiar with our grants prior to coronavirus, we did have sort of upper limits. At the moment, we don't have that, so we will be considering any reasonable requests for work or developments that you want to be doing at the moment. So again, as part of our conversational approach, we will talk to you about what you need. Our priorities for funding really are small grassroots voluntary organisations, particularly those serving people who are disadvantaged. Now, obviously that could be financially, and we will be looking at funding projects where communities or individuals can't afford to fund services themselves, but disadvantage also includes social or physical or geographical. So we will be looking at rural isolation and that sort of thing. Within that, we'll be looking at services that are modifying. We're looking at their sort of financial plans in light of the coronavirus situation. So we need to be seeing that groups are actually changing their plans and looking at how they need to respond to the needs both of their organisation and of the people that they serve. Just a little bit more about disadvantage as we would sort of understand it. So obviously economic disadvantage, we're looking at people who are unable to take part in activities due to low income or unemployment, that sort of thing. Social disadvantage, people who are not able to participate in activities without additional support. Geographic disadvantage, people living in isolated communities or disadvantaged areas who would not otherwise have access to local services. And physical would be looking at people's additional needs because of a disability or mental health issues, for example. In terms of organisations that we fund, again, constituted voluntary or community organisations, registered charities. We also include not-for-profit companies or community interest companies, again, assuming that they would have more than 3 directors and the majority of whom are not paid by the company. For the coronavirus work, we can at the moment fund parish and town councils, but only where they're responding to coronavirus needs in their area. It wouldn't be for general projects. We do fund usually churches and other religious organisations, but only for non-religious activity, so community outreach activity that does not have a religious element. We can fund branches of national organisations as long as there's a local management committee based in Swindon or Wiltshire, that they have a local constitution and a bank account controlled by the local branch. And again, we have made a flexibility that voluntary organisations, particularly those that have developed recently because of the coronavirus situation, we can fund them even if they have no constitutional bank account, but only if they are linked to a constituted organisation or perhaps a statutory body that can manage the grant on their behalf. What a grant can be used for, we're looking for grants covering any reasonable costs related to meeting needs which people have because of the coronavirus situation, costs to help keep an organisation going after the crisis, provided obviously that the people that you serve are disadvantaged in some way and in a financially deprived community. New projects or developments of an existing service, again, as long as that is linked to a community where people are experiencing disadvantage. And we can look at grants towards capital projects, but we still have an upper limit of £5,000 either to fund a project up to £5,000 or a contribution to a project. But if it's a contribution to a bigger project, then you need to have raised the majority of the rest of that. We don't fund schools, or we don't fund statutory bodies other than what we've outlined in terms of coronavirus needs. We don't make grants where that money is going to be given then to individuals or families. Can't fund one-off or sponsored events, projects which duplicate an existing service. That's actually quite important in terms of applications. You know, we need to see that you're aware of what else is going on in the area and how your services complement what else is going on. We can't fund advancement of religion or medical research and equipment or animal welfare or party political activities. And in terms of our application, as at the moment we've only got the one main programme running, then it's a case of having a look on our website for our online application. Do get in touch with us if you have any difficulties doing that, and we can have a look at an alternative. We're open for applications all the time. At the moment, we don't have any set closing dates. We've got panels meeting sort of once a month or so, so decisions can be taken quite quickly. And at the moment, you can apply more than once and hold more than one grant. And we will be running other programmes as and when they come about. We do some programmes on behalf of other funders as well. So it's really important to keep checking into our website, see what's opening, what's coming along, and also make sure you're signed up to our e-bulletin, which Hannah mentioned earlier, which will include any up and coming grant programmes or any grant programmes that are open. I think that's probably a quick whistle stop tour through our current programme. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Karen. I don't think there's any questions at the moment specifically relating to our grant programmes or any other questions for Hannah at the moment, but please do use the chat facility to post anything throughout and we will answer them. I think that's everyone back now. If you found that useful, I know we have previous feedback that people find it really useful to connect with other organisations and find out what they're doing. I don't know if there's anyone in groups that would be happy to share their feedback. I know, Hannah, you were in one of the groups. Was there anything that came out from your group session?
We mainly talked about lottery, probably to no one's surprise. But yeah, we got some really good feedback about, Matt, I hope you don't mind me saying it can feel a little bit daunting to apply to the National Lottery. And things that we ask, and that actually the fact that we have moved away from that kind of set template sometimes feels a little bit probably more stressful for groups. But I was just trying to reassure people that actually, and Matt had said once he got through the process, he realised that actually was more helpful. But I think in first instance, not having those set templates can sometimes feel more difficult and actually more time consuming, which was, yeah, it's interesting to hear. But hopefully the fact that my whole role is based around being able to support people through that process. So just to kind of reassure people that it's not to trip anybody up. It's supposed to be more helpful. What else did we talk about? Was there anything else from our group? I have to say we did only talk about the lottery, so.
Right. Was there anyone else in any of the groups?
No.
So you'd like to share at all with everyone else that you felt that came out that was quite helpful, useful? Okay, that's fine then.
Oops. Actually, sorry, I couldn't get myself on mute then. Just a quickie, in our group we talked about lots of different things, but not only just funding from the two organisations we've heard from today, but how you go about finding other funders. And I was just sharing my experience of using things like the GRIN emails and website, which obviously give out very, very useful information as to what grant givers are out there at that particular moment. You can see within a few lines whether it's applicable to your particular charity, and if it isn't, move on to the next one. So I would suggest, if none of you have done that already, that you look at the GRIN, GRIN Capital's website for funding from other organisations, because I'm sure, like me, everyone is looking for where we can get money from. And I know I'm very encouraged about what I've heard today, but I think, you know, keep all options open and look at other places as well. So that was quite a useful bit that came from our little group.
Great, thank you, Claire. And actually that leads quite nicely onto some information that I was going to share with you all now. So if I just pop the slide up about the other support that we offer as well. Let's go back to the previous slide. So other sources of support that's out there. So here at the Wiltshire Community Foundation, we have a dedicated page on our website listing funding opportunities that are available to charities. And we also have a free searchable database. The link again is on our website. So you can use that to search for both national and local funders, and you can search by area or demographic type. We are working together with Wessex Community Action, Community First and Swindon Voluntary Action Service to put together a host of training events and workshops for the sector in Wiltshire and Swindon. And these are all available on our website. So our future events, we do hold one-to-one monthly sessions with a member of our grants team. These are bookable. And you can come and talk about anything. You can talk to us about applying for grants, any ideas that you might have about setting up structure, policies. So I suggest if you have any questions to use that, that's available. Again, we've got a series of Meet the Funder events. The next one coming up is in April, and it's with Wiltshire Council Area Boards and their grant queen. And then we've got another one in May with Herman Miller, and in June, the St James's Palace Foundation. And we do have a series of workshops as well. And the next one we've got available is Motivating a Remote Workforce. That's taking place in a couple of weeks. And we also have one with us as a grants team about writing grant applications and what you can do to make your grant application a bit more successful from there. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions that they'd like to ask from us as the foundation, or from Hannah about applying for grants to our Pacific programmes. We will be sharing the slides after the event as well, so you'll have those which will have all our contact details and links to those websites that I've just shared with you there as well. I don't think there are any. I don't think there's anything else in the chat. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming today. I hope you found this a useful session. Thank you to Hannah from the lottery for her time and sharing about her the National Lottery grant programmes as well. Hopefully we'll see some of you again.